Good evening, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining us. This is the first webinar of 2021, and thanks for your patience. Myself and Rachel have just gone through an emigration from South Africa to my hometown in Scotland with all the challenges that that's brought with us. But we're now putting up a webinar series of one a month. We're aiming for the first Wednesday of every month. And we're starting with thyroid health because it's a topic that is pretty important for an athlete, but we haven't actually covered it yet. So let's have a go at that. This is a lineup. I've broken it into three sections. So firstly, going through the physiological functions of the thyroid, coupled with the endocrine demands of heavy training. So very much athlete-centric. We'll then talk about interrelationships of the thyroid gland with other physiological systems. And then the most important area is the nutritional and lifestyle recuperation strategies. And that's where I'm going to bring in Rachel Jesson, who is a natural chef, and she's going to discuss some culinary strategies based on what I've talked about the rest of the webinar. And then if you don't mind, we'll give you a sort of 5-minute introduction to the Certificate of Integrative Sports Nutrition for 2021. And then aiming for the last 15 minutes, give or take, for Q&A. Okay, right, so let's go. So questions for you. As I'm talking, I'm not going to wait for these. What's your profession? So I have an idea of your background and what would you like to learn from attending this webinar. So although I've put slides together, I like to know my audience so that I can kind of curve my discussion towards you guys, okay? All right, so there's a chat box there. So have a look for that and just type a few things into that, and I'll keep an eye on that as we go. What I'm not going to cover tonight is a detailed biochemical analysis of the thyroid. I think there's enough detail out there, and it's not the way I try and work anymore. I try and work big picture, where I'm bringing on all aspects of people's lives. Okay, thanks guys for putting in what you're doing. So a lot of dietitians, good personal trainers, physio, nutritionists, architect, welcome. Okay, physio, nutritional therapy. Okay, great. Tell us where you're from as well. Where are you from in the world? What I am going to cover tonight is a big picture contextualization of thyroid health. What am I actually, oh, North Carolina, I went there to university. Okay, we got some Americans, UK, Ireland. Parl, welcome from South Africa. Great, thanks guys. We know the chat box works at least. Okay, so section 1, and that's looking at very much the physiology of the thyroid in brief and the demands of heavy training on the thyroid gland. Okay, so I'm going to start with this paper. This is just on PubMed. It kind of gives a background physiology of the thyroid gland. And my background is physiology, exercise phys, then I went into nutritional therapy. So I try and marry the two. So the way I do nutrition is to firstly understand the physiology of the body. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you with details of this paper, except to give you some highlights here. So what does the thyroid do? We all know it's the base of metabolism, or it's got an important role in metabolism. It's important in growth in children as they're growing up. It's important for heat, thermogenesis, cardiovascular output. So diminishing thyroid output can be problematic in health later on. Oxygenation, type 2 skeletal muscle fiber development, that's really, really key in athletes. Emotional health, stability of the endocrine system is really vital for everyone. And then fertility, ovulation, menstruation. I'm going to demonstrate to you later why that's interlinked. And this is the start of it. For some reason, my mouse isn't working tonight, so I can't point at things. But if you start at the top there, you get the hypothalamus pituitary. The bit that looks like male testicles is the pituitary. And I think that's quite fitting because a big part of the output of the pituitary is sex hormone support. But part of it is also the thyroid gland. So we're basically getting pituitary secretion or stimulation of the thyroid to secrete thyroxine, initially T4, then T3, the active form, and then you get feedback loops to try and regulate that function, in theory. Homeostasis only works in theory, so just remember that. And here's a nice little diagram that I've just pulled together from a few different resources over the years. We need the amino acid tyrosine to make thyroxine, which is otherwise known as T4, and then that needs to be converted to T3, which is the most active form. We need iodine for the first conversion, and we need selenium and zinc for the second conversion. So these are nutrients that you'll probably be quite familiar with related to thyroid function. But then we've got stress, and stress does a bunch of stuff. It firstly inhibits that T4 to T3 conversion, but it can also support conversion to reverse T3, which is itself inhibitory to T3. So I've lumped it under stress. Stress, it's not just emotional stress, but that's part of it. Dieting is a stress. So ironically, we need the thyroid for metabolism, but if you diet too hard, you can inhibit the thyroid and shoot yourself in the foot. Heavy training. We think of athletes as prime metabolism examples, but many are getting into a let's say a subclinical hypothyroid picture. Some of them are getting diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and I'll go into that later. Okay, and there's a bunch of other things that we'll add in later as well. Okay, so exercise as a stress model and the interplay between the HPA axis and the HP thyroid axis. So basically, the stress of chronic exercise induces certain changes to the thyroid axis. Peripheral thyroid hormone metabolism suppression is observed, and there's a resulting hormonal status.
I had trouble getting it.
Okay, I think someone, can you mute everyone, please?
True, Jane.
Judy Watson, I can't mute you for some reason. So if you can mute yourself, that would be great.
Thanks, Simone. So basically, the essence of this is chronic heavy exercise can be inhibitory to T3 conversion. And as we saw in the simple slide before, can actually enhance reverse T3 levels. Okay, and I've actually got 3 different slides, 3 different studies saying the same thing. And this graph is a kind of representation of what is seen in science looking at thyroid function. So when TSH, which is the secretion from the pituitary, creeps up, it's because the thyroid gland is not listening. It's like mom and dad are the pituitary, thyroids are one of the children, child's not listening, and the voice gets louder and louder from the parents. So TSH is the voice of the parents. At the same time, the T4 and the T3 is representative of the thyroid function decreasing. Reverse T3, on the other hand, is pushing up during stressful events. Okay, so that could be called euthyroid 6 syndrome, which is one kind of description of this scenario. We wouldn't think of athletes as sick, but in essence, they can make themselves so. Here's another one, thyroid and the interrelationship of cortisol during prolonged exhaustive exercise. it's been demonstrated that subjects that cortisol increases during exercise were related to the depletion of thyroid hormones 24 hours later. So that's quite a delay, but this is still acute. So you'll see the name chronic at times, but it's still an acute exercise stressor that affects the thyroid gland. Okay, and here's another one that I recently picked up as well. Now, there's a few Americans online, so you might be aware of this guy in center, Galen Rupp. Phenomenal athlete, is probably the only white runner to take on the Africans in this current era. There have been some in the past. I used to know Craig for example, in Australia, who could take on the African runners, but he's phenomenal. But there's been controversy around him and his coach, Alberto Salazar, and that is the use of, or being diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which then can lead to some kind of thyroid medication. Now, having just presented 3 studies that shows you that you can suppress your thyroid function with heavy exercise, and that's like one bout of heavy exercise, you could, if you had the kind of cheating mindset, say, okay, I'm going to push my athletes through a really, really heavy period of training, not just one session, but back-to-back heavy sessions, and then go and get a blood test done. And you could actually push yourself into hypothyroidism. So it's a lot harder for athletes to cheat in drugs nowadays, but there's these kind of lower penetrance kind of things going on. And it's been in cycling as well, where athletes have been found on thyroid supporting medication, which inadvertently will be a huge benefit. But the question is, are they really clinically suppressed, or is it more of an exercise-induced suppression? Okay, so question mark there. So with athletes, my point is here that they can push themselves into suppressing their thyroid function. And you look at any of these athletes and they don't look like they've got thyroid problems, because as clinicians, we think of thyroid problems as struggling to lose weight. But that's only one clinical sign. Okay, I'm going to share a little diagram that I share with my clients. And if you've been on webinars with me before or any of my courses, you'll have seen this. But it's just a little reminder of, if you're working with a client and you're trying to explain thyroid function or dysfunction, it's quite a nice little benefit. So you can see the hypothalamus and the pituitary in the middle of the head there. There's the HPA axis, and it's got a nice bold arrow, which I'll explain in a minute. There's your HPG, or gonadal axis, and there's your HPT, or thyroid axis. So you've seen the arrow going to the adrenals is stronger. So this is like mom and dad are hypothalamus and pituitary, gonads, adrenals, thyroids are the 3 kids. If you get one naughty kid, in this case the adrenals, the other 2 can get maybe a bit neglected or compromised in how much support they're getting, how much attention they're getting. And this is the modern scenario that I see again and again and again. When somebody's under long-term heavy pressure from work, from heavy training schedules, from not sleeping enough, from not eating well enough, they've gone through a divorce, death in the family, etc. But they're quite extreme things. But you just take a bit of stress at work, combined with training for this marathon, combined with not sleeping enough, combined with, the wife's not really on board with you training for this marathon because you're away from the kids too much. And then you've got stress. And it's a physiological stress that it manifests as. And then you should have a negative feedback loop from all these organ systems to the head. There's something in the head called a brain that often overrules. And there's a psychology of athletes And I'm actually presenting for the Chrysalis Effect tomorrow, and they're a chronic fatigue organization. So I see a lot of athletes are coming now to chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and lots for autoimmunity. And Hashimoto's is an underactive autoimmune thyroid problem. I see lots of that. It's crazy. And otherwise, who should be healthy athletes? Okay, so simple little explanation. And the brain overrules the fact that you should slow down and stop pushing the gland so hard. There's also an adrenal direct link. If you dig around PubMed and pull up some papers, there is a direct link between the adrenals and the thyroid gland. Okay, this is one of my favorite little graphs. Basically, the question is, how can we train below this red line? The red line represents a 0% change in cortisol, and it's around about 60% of VO2 max intensity, which for, say, an endurance athlete is, quote, steady, a steady run, steady swim. Most of the training, especially for athletes who are pushing the boundaries, or athletes who are recreational, lumping too much on top of a already busy day, they need to bring some of their day below that line. And below the 0 line means better breathing. That's things like yoga, Pilates, meditation, Tai Chi. Anything that calms the nervous system can bring you down below that. Even if you're fit enough, a very easy, rhythmic, gentle, breathing focused run can get you down to negative cortisol levels. But it's the mindset that we must go out and do this hard run that keeps pushing us up. And this is, I'm not going to read through this. It's basically, by the way, we'll share these slides with you. So if you want to look at anything in more detail, all the references are at the bottom as well. We'll send those and you can have a look through. So this slide basically says that at appropriate training loads, we can increase the stability of the HPA axis and also HPT, HPG, okay? So moderate training appropriate for the person is really, really vital. And it brings me to a hormesis model. Hormesis is basically the theory that if you push the body a bit, it will adapt to get stronger or better in some regards. And life is hormesis, guys. It's an important thing. If you go out, let's say, and lift 50 kilos squat into a parallel squat 10 times 3 sets, you'll get a hormetic response because you'll break down tissues that will then regrow. So next week when you do it again, you can do 55 kilos for the same thing. But there's a point, you can see this bell-shaped curve that you can physiologically push yourselves up to a point through exercise. And that's what kind of moderate recreational athletes do. But if you really try and push the boundaries, follow the training program too closely that was set by an overzealous coach, of which there are many, you then tip over the other side. And I would reckon I spent most of my running career on the right-hand side of that curve, as have most people who were really serious, athletes. Okay, so section 2, this is interrelationships of the thyroid gland. And this is a kind of redraw of the Institute for Functional Medicine spider diagram. When we teach on the certificate course, I use this as a base for a lot. The endocrine system, we term it communication, along with the nervous system and the immune system. And the interrelationships are strong. It's like a spider's web. If you ping a corner of it, the whole thing collapses. So you need every facet of that strong in order to have whole health. And the base unit of this course that we do, this teaching that we do, is that health is the basis of performance. You can't go for top performance if health is not in place. Okay, so here's the hypothalamus and pituitary again. And the first one is the relationship with the nervous system. The hypothalamus is a major conduit for nerve pathways, but we've just talked about it through the glandular endocrine aspect. And your guys' videos are in front of us, so I can't quite read it. But basically, we're talking about the interrelationships between the nervous system and the endocrine system. They all start at the hypothalamus pituitary axis. And the same things that you do to try and stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system into a relaxation response are the same things that will support your thyroid gland, your adrenal glands, your sex glands in a healthy way. Okay, really, really important. So stress balance in your life is key. Here's one talking about mitochondrial linkage with thyroid. Of course, the mitochondria now, we've always known they're all through the body, but under an exercise kind of focus, we think of it just of them in the skeletal muscles, but actually they're everywhere, and we need to nourish them everywhere for all of our organ systems to work towards it, work for us. Okay, so our mitochondrial health, ubiquinone, by the way, is CoQ10, is vital for thyroid function. And then here's a new one. There seems to be a gut axis with everything right now. We've known the gut-brain axis for a while. Simone presented last year on the gut musculoskeletal axis. So in other words, the gut's the base of a lot of stuff. The gut's the primary base of the immune system, and therefore it's a primary hotspot of inflammation or anti-inflammatory aspects of your body. We can negatively affect our thyroid through inflammation, for example, but we can also negatively affect it if we're not absorbing our nutrients properly. So the gut thyroid function is really, really important. In other words, let's nourish the gut first. As nutritional therapists have been talking about that for donkey's years. We're just starting to put more meat on the bone in terms of detail and why we want to nourish that. And the microbiota stroke microbiome is a hot topic nowadays. Okay, and then we're going to get a bit fluffy with you, but I actually don't term this fluffy. This is the emotional health of our body. And I just typed in energetics of the thyroid, had a wee look around, and I found this really interesting blog article. It's extremely long. And in essence, if you go to somebody who works more on the emotional well-being realm of things, thyroid problems can be represented as a misconnection between the head and the heart. And we're not expressing ourselves, because this is the throat chakra in sort of Ayurvedic descriptions, and the throat is where we express. Okay, so obviously it means lots of different things to different people, but I do not discount this stuff. This is really important. So if you get an athlete with, say, a bully as a coach, and they don't feel like they've got their own voice in their training, hey, there's a really important connection and with the emotional health. Okay, and then the third section, we're going to bring Rachel in a sec. The first thing I'm going to talk about is nutrition, because that's obviously what we're focusing on. And this is just a base nutrition slide that I use for lots of things. And my theory is, and I don't really think it's a theory, it's a fact, really. If you want to nourish and keep healthy any particular body system, like the thyroid gland, like the adrenal glands, you need to get the basics right and go for whole body health. I feel we've mechanized physiology too much. Like if you buy a physiology textbook, Chapter 1 is cardiovascular system. Chapter 2 is gastrointestinal health. Chapter 3 is the endocrine system, etc., etc. But if we actually take those chapters and mix them all up, that's what our physiology is doing. And then you add in a psychology book and you mix that up with a physiology book. And then you add in a sociology book and mix that up. And then add in a farming book. And then we're starting to get somewhere because we're talking about food. So this is real basics. Focus on and try and avoid. But you know, some of these avoid limit things can be helpful. Like if you really love your coffee, buy the best stuff and drink it slowly and really savor it. If you really like your whiskey like I do, spend 50 quid, not 10 quid on a bottle of whiskey and just have a tiny little dram and enjoy it. So in our book, Wholesome Nutrition, we describe pay double and drink half, or eat half. You know, pay double for your chocolate. And then it becomes a mindful eating exercise. Okay, specifically to the thyroid, here are the nutrients that tend to be talked about. So iodine, selenium, and zinc, you've seen these are conversion enzymes, well, supporting the conversion enzymes from tyrosine to T3. L-tyrosine is the base amino acid to make thyroxine, and then you get different vitamins. So I have taken a bit of time and created this table with all these nutrients in there. I've added omega-3 as well because avoiding inflammation of the thyroid gland is really, really important. Okay, so if you just kind of take a squiz down the food list, you wouldn't want to have hypothyroidism and be vegan, let's say, because the easiest sources are, and many of these are fish first or some kind of a sea shellfish. Sea vegetables are really important for iodine. And then you're going on to meats and dairies and eggs and so on. Nuts and seeds are really vital as well, and Brazil nuts are quite famous for selenium actually, and it is true. So that's just a little resource for you if you're being thyroid specific, but remember, and this is leading up to Rachel coming in, we need to be eating in a way to nourish our gut. We need to be eating in a way to nourish our energetics, which might be mitochondria or it might be emotional energetics. And we need to eat in a way that makes us feel good. And that is key to our food, our nutrition. Okay, I'm going to welcome in Rachel. She's my partner in life and partner in our ventures. And
are you able to stop the share?
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to stop share, guys, so you can see her properly.
Hi there. Welcome to today. Just overhearing Ian, this is the first time I'm actually hearing the webinar now, sitting listening to him talk. And I come from a background of being an ex-national triathlete, and I managed to blow my thyroid through that sport. If I knew what I knew today, things would be different, but it was about 25 years ago, and I've come streaks along in the health realm since. So I personally think it might be a little bit too late. So I am on, is altroxin a hormone? What is altroxin?
It's a type of medication that provides thyroxine.
So I am on medication that does provide thyroxin, but I still remain after 25 years on the lowest dose. So it's the minimal amount of altroxin. I wish I could be off it. I have tried, I've played with it, but the stresses in life just keep taking hold of me. So it's incredibly difficult to stop it reacting with the stress. So there are ways that I have, helped myself out nutritionally as well, which has helped keep the levels very low, because what normally happens is you just keep increasing your levels over the years of the medication until you're on like basically the maximum amount, because obviously the body adapts and gets used to a specific hormone, and often you need more of it. So that's just a bit of my background of where I come from. So I'm the red flag in this webinar with regards to a poor thyroid, and it all came from training. So, you know, I was doing 6 hours a day. I was at the top in my game. So, you know, when you're winning and racing, you kind of park your health to the side and just hope that when it's all done, things will settle again. And unfortunately it didn't. So I was really pushing my body to the maximum limits, as well as doing a very big degree at university and doing a master's in sports science and sports psychology. And I had my plate completely full. So I'd be training in the dark in both the early hours of the morning, and then I'd finish university at 5 o'clock and continue training in the dark after that. Missed all the fun social nights and pub piss up things, but that's because I was just dedicated to being a quality triathlete. So that's just basically the background. So now how I work with food is a lot with the energetics. So what I'm hearing Ian, as he's waffling on, I'm hearing a conventional paradigm. So he doesn't know I'm telling you this because he doesn't know what I have planned to speak about today. So the conventional nutritional paradigm basically breaks things up into parts, and it's fairly mechanistic. And yes, it has its place in nutrition because it can support people who have thyroid issues. So what it does is it looks at a food as the sum of its parts. In other words, you see the nutritional analysis of the food. So it's this particular grain has this amount of protein, this amount of carbohydrates, fats, minerals, etc. And that's what the conventional paradigm does. The energetic and traditional paradigm do not break these things down. And this is the way I both teach and prepare foods. So the way that is done is we look at the entire food, and we look at the entire human being. And then we bring these two together. So there's no sum of the parts in either. So it's the human in entirety and the food in entirety. Now that you have that vision, then we actually take the food and we look at what the food has gone through, because whatever the food goes through gets internalized and ingested and assimilated by the human eating it. In other words, and I think it's easiest now, I apologize if they're vegetarians or vegans listening to this, but we all know the horrors of chicken farming, particularly commercial chicken farms. We know that they are in 23 hours of light. I know that's in South Africa. I did the research I needed to do. We know that they're completely force-fed. We know that they're cramped and crowded. We know that they peck each other, whether it's on the bottom, on the head, in the eye, scratching, they scratch, they force the hormones and the growth promoters cause them to grow too quickly, and often their legs break. It's a very sad state of affairs. Now, what nutritional energetics does is it looks at the journey of the food. So every bit of food has a story to tell. And the story of the chicken, of that commercially grown chicken, is one of anger, of frustration, of even some insecurity, of bitter, tense, hyperactive, just this, like almost like being in a pressure cooker, wanting to explode. So in nutritional energetics, we see that as you, the person eating that particular chicken, as taking those qualities of that specific chicken and basically entraining yourself. So basically eating what the energy of that chicken. So when you think of eating the flesh, when you think of how psychologically the chicken has functioned in its lifetime, that's on a cellular level is in its flesh, which you consume. And that negative energy is an energy that gets absorbed by the person eating it. So that's why it's so important that we eat foods that are incredibly well sourced, that are ethically sourced, that are organic or naturally grown or wild. So when you're sourcing food, you want to make sure you've got absolute quality, because that journey is the journey you want as an athlete to assimilate. That is a health journey. So when the animal or the food has gone through a healthy life, it's had the life that an animal is supposed to have, then that energy is the right sort of energy that's going to be absorbed in the human. So I can look at individual components, but I can't express enough. When I was looking at Ian's list of foods, the foods that he was listing were whole foods. The ones he was telling you to avoid had human intervention. So they had some form of refinement. They had some sort of human contamination. Now, in energetics, we avoid human contamination. In other words, we go for whole foods. And when I say whole foods, we would choose to eat, the most impactful energetic nutrition will be obtained from a whole oat groat, for example. Whereas a 2-minute quick, easy oats where you just pour hot water in it and then you can scoff your face is not the right kind of oat. So even though we hear that oats is good, we know that that specific oat energetically has a very low level of energy and nutrition. So why? Because of the refinement, because of the process that it needs to go through. So it's removed half the bran. It's just, it's been so highly processed that they have to add things back into it synthetically in order for it to give you some form of nutrition. Now, conventionally, if we had to look at that oat groat and the 2-minute oat, you will see on the nutritional analysis that they'll be almost identical. And that's what nutritional energetics is not. So it's not breaking it down to the simplest of nutrients. It's looking at the whole oat groat without the bran removed, with all the fat and the protein and the carbs, as opposed to the synthetic stuff that's been super refined. So that's the way I teach, and that's the way we cook. And that's the way someone who's suffering from, it wouldn't only be thyroid, it could be anything. When you eat whole foods, the body knows exactly what to do with it. The body knows how to assimilate it and process it and take those nutrients and literally use them in the body. So that's the whole food approach. When Ian spoke of the fluffy bit, the emotional side of the thyroid, when I cook, I pull in the chakras, because the chakras help me, and I'm able to access it quick now because I'm trained in it, but those chakras help me find what my body needs today. And I can ask those chakras to tell me what my family or my children need today. So by accessing your energies, enables you to reach for things that you need. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a product called Lugol's iodine. I experimented with that. It's basically just raw iodine, and you can just put a little bit on your skin. And what you notice, that if you have iodine or thyroid issues, so low iodine, your body absorbs that iodine really quickly, transdermally. Whereas if you don't have issues, it can last for 7 days and you sit with a bit of a mess on your arm. So that's a very good indicator that you could use almost information from your body without doing any formal test as such. But then you can also access energy sensors, and your body will tell you what it wants if you're in tune with it and if you listen to it. So that takes some time. It takes the fluffy I'm going to call spiritual and emotional, because we need that connection in order to be able to honor our body, to be able to give it what it needs. Because often if you open the fridge, you open the spice section, you'll be reaching out for things that your body actually needs without you like completely conscious of it. So having access to your energy centers is important. It's an important component of the way we eat and the way we choose foods. So what I would do, what I would encourage is maybe to include more sea vegetables. And I think a lot of people don't know how to prepare them. or how to include them on a regular basis. So for example, the things that I would do, I know kale is very good for thyroid health, and I make these dehydrated kale cheesy kind of chips, which is completely vegan, and the cheese comes from nutritional yeast. It's having snacks like that that's available. Nori, dulse, and kombu, both beautiful seaweeds. These seaweeds come with heaps and heaps of minerals and beautiful things that you're unable to source from other plants or other animals. You could dry roast those seaweeds, because maybe dulse is a bit chewy, but by dry roasting them dries them out, and it makes them crispy. And you could use it as a powder. You could mix that into a salad dressing. And what I do is make a mineral dust. And what you do is you just take it and grind it up in a pestle and mortar, and you make a fine powder. You can put that with some black sesame seeds. You can grind it with a beautiful sea salt, and then you use that as your salting agent. You can make nori chips, where you would make you would put 2 sheets of nori and a beautiful sesame paste in the middle and bake that. There's heaps of things that you can do to support your nutrition. Arami is another one. You can make an arami salad or a wakame salad with a nice sesame dressing. So what I'm saying is, don't just go with the kale chips. I'm saying go with variety, and that's how we cook energetically as well. We look at all the families of vegetables. We look at all the range of proteins in both beans, tofu tempeh, the animal part of it, and we look at all the grains. And the way we teach is to make sure that you have 4 of each from each different category, so you have continual variety. So now that I've told you about nori, what you can do with nori, you can do with dulse as a dry roast, and what you do with dulse, you can do with kombu. So you can have all 3 and just rotate them all the time in your cooking. This is what's going to make you healthy. This is what's going to drive the person up. When Ian said you weren't allowed to have chocolate, I say, hell yeah, have chocolate, but have the real proper cacao. It's a superfood. When you've got an underactive thyroid, one of the things you have to worry about is weight. If you're not properly medicated, or if you've just discovered you've got the issue, what does cacao do? It's an appetite suppressant. Any athlete who's putting on weight needs an appetite suppressant, a natural one. It's filled with magnesium. It's a mood lifter, because feeling like you're putting on like a kilo feels dreadful. So that can pull an athlete down. I know athletes have to worry. The lighter you are, the faster you go. I've been through it. I know what it's about. So don't deny yourself of whole foods. Cacao is a whole food. It starts as a bean. It can be found in nibs, pastes, butters, oils. That's what it is. So go with it. Have the proper form. And there's the only reason you should refrain from eating something is when you have an anaphylactic shock towards it, and that would be something like gluten. But if you hate Brussels, find a good way to cook them, because it's possible. It's amazing. Everything can be yummy. You just need to know what you're doing. So we're running our first sports cookery module, where I'll be teaching people how to get creative and access their intuition. So this is just, for me, cooking comes naturally. For everybody, cooking should come naturally. It's just giving yourself the opportunity to try different things. So don't limit yourself on something just because you don't like the taste of it, because I used to not like Brussels sprouts, and now I think they're amazing. You just need to find out how to cook them. You really don't want to isolate a specific food. I know in the living foods diet, if you eat the raw broccoli, in other words, it's not like you physically take a floret and eat it. They'll marinate it and then dehydrate it, but that dehydration is still seen as a raw, the broccoli in its raw form. And too much of this can, cause swelling in your thyroid. So we don't want to, my message to you today is not to go and find all the nori and seaweed and kale and Brazil nuts. It's about having access to a variety of different products. I mean, there's nothing stopping you getting kelp powder, and popping that in a smoothie. There's so, it's about you exploring the variety that's out there that's going to help you heal, or your athlete heal and support their own functioning. When we have too much toxicity through synthetic colorants and sport juices and concocted protein powders that have just got full of E codes and full of horrible things, it's taking away what the athlete really needs to be doing. The athlete, when they're done with a hard session, they need an opportunity to recover. And to give them that opportunity, we need to free them from toxins, so the energy they do have will be healing. So be mindful of that. In energetic nutrition, we talk on the thermogenesis, so that we talk on the heating and cold that foods have to offer. I like to follow the Chinese model, the Chinese medicine model. So I know, as a thyroid sufferer, a hypothyroid sufferer, that I get cold very quickly. And I would suggest avoiding cooling foods. So including oils, because oil is warming, including ginger, including cooked foods. These would be supportive to the health of an athlete who, has an issue with an underactive thyroid. Warming foods are very beneficial, incredibly nourishing and digestible, where salads and watermelons and cooling foods require a lot more from the body to help digest them, so a stronger digestive system. So I recommend that you go out there and you just go and explore the options, but please don't mono eat. Use as much variety as you can from all the different families. Pick whole, wholesome ingredients where it hasn't been tainted by humans. So things that you can pick off the tree, pull out of the ground, that swim in the sea, that walk on the ground, that don't come in boxes. And if you eat that kind of way, your journey to health will be speedy and amazing. So now I'll hand you back over to Ian.
Thanks, Rach. Okay, we're going to go into questions in a minute. I'm just going to finish off a couple of slides. Right, I just want to sort of finish off with, you'll find stuff like this on the internet. Foods to avoid if you're diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So yeah, avoid the man-made stuff, as Rach says, but stuff like broccoli and cauliflower, it's about how you prepare it. You'd have to have a lot of raw cruciferous vegetables to impact your thyroid gland, but if you prepare it properly, hey, it's okay in moderation, as everything should be. Soya is another one. Yes, absolutely avoid soya milk and soya, like commercial soya cheeses and products designed for meat substitution through the supermarket, but absolutely go for authentic tempehs and misos and what else, natto, all the stuff that the Japanese and the Chinese and so on eat that's been fermented. So the fermentation makes it assimilable to our body. Okay, so read past the headlines. This paper talks about toxicants. So it actually gives a fair viewpoint on these types of food. So it gives the theory why these types of foods have been implicated with inhibiting thyroid function, but then, how much weighting of evidence is there? And it's actually not that much, right? You need to go with a view like Rachel in terms of how you prepare, how you source, and that brings you a lot of answers. I'll just add the things in this paper that do concern me, and that is all of the man-made stuff. Organochloride compounds and pesticides, PCBs, benzophenone 2, UV filters and cosmetics, heavy metals. These being toxic from man-made chemicals is where you need to be concerned and having a look at. But these are more specialist areas to work with a practitioner to do, well supervised detoxes. Supplementation. You've got all these typical nutrients that we talk about. Rosemary is a herb that's supportive. Adaptogens can be really good. They're very supportive of adrenal function. And as you know now, adrenals are very supportive if they're balanced to thyroid health. And then you've got things like glandulas and desiccated thyroid. That can be a more specialist way of getting somebody through off a direct thyroxine product. Others, you need to be looking at the rest of the body, specifically adrenal support, calm the nervous system, balance your blood sugars, and then other bespoke choices based on the individual you as a practitioner are dealing with. Training, as you've heard, is really, really, really key. Okay, this is a very simple quiz. I use it a lot. If you're scoring well in this quiz and you're being honest with yourself, then great, go out and have a hard session. If you're scoring low, the cutoff, by the way, I should have written on here is 20. So if you're getting like below 20 when you score this quiz, maybe go and do some yoga or some meditation or just lie in bed longer that particular day. Or do it later on when you're feeling fresher. This is my friend Pete Williams wrote this list. And it's a bunch of different active restoration aspects that you can bring into your life. And, this is actually before its time. It's a great list. I keep referring to it. I can't criticize it one little bit, even though I like to criticize Pete occasionally. I think it's a great little resource, okay? So that's, one last slide. What we do 22 to 23 hours per day are of base importance. Then the training load, then our nutrition, but some of our nutrition will fall into that base layer as well, and then supplements. So what are we doing all the time in the day when we're not training? That's really, really key. And athletes need to ask themselves that question. We can so easily box. Okay, well, that's my training box, that's my work box, that's my girlfriend box, that's my sleep box, that's my eating box. But no, they all merge together. Okay, so there's a few references if you want to chase up anything that we've shared with you tonight. And then I'm just going to whiz through this because I know we've sort of run over a little bit to get to questions. So basically both CISN, Center for Integrative Sports Nutrition, and FSN Magazine kind of support these webinars and allow us to bring them to you free, okay? So we're allowed the odd pitch here and there. Right, so this is the certificate course. It's building a base of integrative functional nutrition supporting sporting health, going through more classic performance-based nutrition, but still with a kind of functional lens, into a specialized sports nutrition module. That's the main certificate course. And then this year, we're literally about to start it on Friday. We're adding in natural sports cookery, which on itself is a standalone course as well. Module 1, I'm not going to read through these, and these are all on the website, and you can get these slides, okay? So Module 3, I just want to spend a moment there. We've just about finished our lineup, so we're about to launch the course now. Unfortunately, it looks like we won't be able to do the live version of the course because we were doing it in London again this year. We keep wanting to, but get knocked back by the restrictions. But we're hoping to do Module 3 live in London in September. We'll do our best to make that happen. but we start the online course in June and October. Module 4, this is nicely designed by our IT guy, Helder, and this has got its own page on the website as well. So if you're interested in what Rachel discussed today and how that's supportive to an athlete, have a look at that. And as I say, this is a standalone course. You get band CPD points for it as well if you're a nutritional therapist, and it starts on Friday. We've got videos online, so you can have a look at little clips of all the lecturers doing their bit. There's the certifications, so NTEC and BAND, so nutritional therapies focused, and also bases to cover the sports science end of things. Our core team is myself, Simone, and Rachel, and Memi is supportive on the social media. She's also doing the course herself, and Helder is our IT specialist. And then the price, we've kept the price the same for the last couple of years, so it's 2,300 as the full cost. Or if you want to do with module 4 as well, it's 2,900. But I'm feeling generous and we're about to launch this. So I'm going to give a webinar price, reduced price until the end of this week. Okay, so you just need to go through our contact page on the website and say, yes, I would like to do the course. And we'll give you this early bird price. Okay, there's contact details for us. Okay, right. We are open to question time. I'm just going to stop the share and go to the chat box. Okay, so, right, so Yelena, come to that. Right, so please get stuck into typing in the chat box any questions you've got. I'm going to start with Yelena, who asks, any specific thyroid support for premenopausal women who train regularly? Would be good to find out today. Okay, my answer to any question like that is health is health. So it doesn't matter if she's premenopausal or miles before or miles after that. You need to start with the individual first. Okay, so work with her as an individual person. What are her ailments? What are her weak links? So when we talk about menopause, going through menopause, we're definitely looking at endocrine health, so thyroid and its impact on the sex hormones. We're also talking about detoxification of those sex hormones. And then I will always bring in gut health. Okay, so gut, liver, endocrine. And the way I work on thyroid, regardless of what stage of life they're at, is adrenals first or stress first and calming the nervous system. So what is it? So this is the functional medicine way of doing it. Antecedents, triggers, and mediators. What are the predisposing factors that brought her to the point of being subclinical? I'm assuming subclinical on her thyroid, and then working on that to start with. Is there any of that you can rewind a little bit and help with, say, stress management or better nutrition or better training patterns? Then that's the base, and then you go up to, okay, right, let's specifically go into thyroid function. And I like making sure we cover those base nutrients. So you've got a table there now that you can use. And I also like kind of bespoke thyroid products, which include the iodine and the zinc and the selenium and the rosemary and maybe glandulars. It depends on whether they're medicated or not, okay? So I hope that kind of answers your question. And then also think primary and secondary. Is she going through premenopausal stage prematurely? And if so, is it due to the thyroid or maybe adrenal health? and then you work on those things as primary. Or if she's going through a kind of in normal time, but female hormones are kind of imbalanced and that's affecting the thyroid, then you work on the female health first, primarily through gut, liver, and then maybe supplementation of specific female hormone herbs that might help that. Okay. Molly, do I have suggestions for sunscreen replacement? I can go behind me and grab one out of the drawer. I don't remember what brand it is, but that was from South Africa. You might not even get it in other countries. So what I suggest is go to your local health shop as a start, because some of them will have a good range of knowledge. Go online, look for chemical-free sunblocks or sunscreens, and try and just tune into brands that are actually authentically trying to do a good job. Authentically meaning they're not just putting all the right labels on their products to say natural, organic, free of parabens, when actually you turn it over and they're full of everything else. So yeah, you need to do just a little bit of local homework there. Okay, what would you advise to a patient who has amenorrhea but still wants to keep her high intensity workouts? I would send her to my colleague Gerard, who's online right now, to work on her psychology, because if you can demonstrate clearly that her training is having an ill effect on her female hormones, that's a problem. You don't want to have amenorrhea for too long, but it's incredibly common nowadays. So first comes the negotiation. Secondly, if that doesn't work, being a good practitioner and you want to support your client as best as possible, knowing she's going to do it anyway, work on the meal timing pre, during, and post. Okay, so if she's going to crack a dawn at 5 in the morning with nothing in her stomach, try and negotiate the timing of that session to later, so there's a breakfast in her tummy, or a digested breakfast in her tummy. Start bringing in sports drinks. I've got a webinar on our website. You just go through resources and webinars and you'll find all the past recorded ones. And you can basically look through a sports drink one. Use some DIY sports drinks so her adrenals aren't working quite so hard during the sessions. Come in afterwards with a smoothie with some protein in it, so she goes into a recovery mode a little bit quicker and she doesn't go into an insulin resistant state, because without food that can happen, and then it stresses the adrenals more, and obviously the thyroid as well. What would you do with an underactive thyroid client allergic to fish and shellfish? I'm assuming that's quite common. I haven't come across it too much myself, but what I find with hypothyroid clients is they do tend to be quite sensitive because they have run down their resources. And this is an analogy I use. Okay, there's a cup of water. It's about, let's say 6 pence full. If this is life load, there's my training, there's my work, there's my, a stressful relationship in there. Now I try and add in some extra training sessions that affects my sleep. Okay, then I'm up here. Now I get a promotion at work and I don't have time to eat properly. Then it goes up and it overflows. And then you've got absolutely no resource for the body to rebalance and recalibrate. So people I find who are very sensitive to certain foods, I generally find their immune system is hypersensitive and the cup's full. You need to start unloading some stuff in their life for their immune system to settle into a balance. Before you get to that, and you might never get to that, obviously, be creative with things like sea vegetables, nuts and seeds. So yeah, obviously fish and shellfish came up a lot on that list that I created. But the sea vegetables are very good for the iodine. Nuts and seeds are very good for the selenium and zinc. You've got different varieties for the vitamins. You can get into herbs. So, you know, if you're a practitioner, you'll have access to some really good product companies. So I used a couple in South Africa. I'm now back using a couple of companies I used here in the UK before, and you get some really nice thyroid products. So, you know, do your homework there. Okay, Catherine, any thoughts or tips on competitive inhibition of iodine by chlorine in a swimmer with hypothyroidism? Not autoimmune. What about an iodine sniff pop prior to training? Phew. Okay, so this is very, Catherine is a very, very clever lady. So she comes on our course and lectures on gastrointestinal health. So I think you're ahead of me there, Catherine, to be honest. This is very, very specific. If chlorine is inhibiting, yeah, you could either do the acute thing of iodine dosing around the actual swimming, or just get into a daily pattern of supplementing with iodine, and then do the iodine test or do a blood test for iodine. But I know you're ahead of that stuff with compared to me, Catherine. Person feels awful post swimming. Yeah, you've got some homeopaths that will do concoctions for chlorine sensitivity as well. So maybe worth looking at that too. And you know, any freshwater pools that your client could access, or do a little bit of open water swimming in conjunction with pool swimming. So yeah, you definitely, I mean, you don't want to, an athlete wants to do what they want to do to compete, but if every single day they're feeling compromised, it's not going to last too long. Okay, any other questions, guys, before we finish up? Okay, right, everyone wants to go and have their dinner. So I just want to say thank you very much. And thanks for joining us. As I said, look out, we will be doing one webinar per month. And in the next week or so, we'll get, we've got the lineup now for the year. So we'll put that on the website. We'll send out a newsletter. If you're interested in Rachel's cookery course, send us an email. If you're interested in the course and you'd like that discount, yeah, as I say, we're just launching it. I've taken this webinar as an opportunity to launch the course. So you'll hear more over the next couple of months, and the first intake starts in June. Okay, right. So good night, and have a good evening, and I hope to see you next month again.